Okay, so I got Spencer here, Spencer Chamberlain.
What up?
So I was trying to figure out how long we've known each other, and I keep this can't be right, but it feels like it's been about 2021 ish years at this juncture,
Well,
and that can't be right,
that
can it?
that's not right because next year's Chasing Safety 20-year anniversary. So that was the summer of '04. So we probably didn't meet
Probably
until
'05 then.
'05.
Wow.
'05, '05, '06. I want to say I want to say '05 though.
Yeah, that's a
Those
long time.
those first couple years felt like they were so slow. Like those years felt like long. When you look at it back on it, like now a year feels like nothing, and shit goes like, oh, they haven't put out a record in 4 years, or this guy I haven't seen my friend in 5 years, and it's like nothing. But
Hmm.
back then, when we think about the times when we were kids, like 2004 was the longest year ever, and like '05, like the stuff that we did between '04 and '05 is like it seemed like a lifetime worth of like.
Well, and then you would lose, and we'll talk about this in a minute. But when you get out and you're on tour or whatever, I mean, it could be 60 days, could be 120 days in spurts, and you like time is kind of a weird little like thing that you don't really exist in anyone's normal life. Like
Right.
your days and nights are you're almost nocturnal. So it's
Yeah.
it's like it's a weird way to like live and also measure time. So, I mean,
Yeah, I think it keeps you young too. It's like you also miss out a lot of your youth, like when
yeah.
normal kids go to college and start a family younger or start building their credit or buying houses and all that stuff. Like you're in a van or a bus around the world playing in venues, like it's living the dream for sure, but it definitely parts of you grow up a lot faster than you would if you were living the normal life, and parts of you stay
You're
like,
like stunted.
yeah,
Yeah,
stunted is the
yeah.
word. Yeah,
It's like you don't know how you're not like emotionally intelligent at all. So
dude.
there's
I,
you
I,
know
I say this all the time that I had no idea who I was until I was like in my early 30s, if even.
yeah.
Like I was,
Yes. So I would say like mid 30s for me. I think
yeah,
35, 36, right? So I got divorced in that time frame. Like there was like this all like my youngest went through her heart issues and all the surgeries and stuff,
right.
and so like there were so many things that kind of happened in that little window of time. And I really truly don't think I understood like who Josh was until 35, 36 years old.
I can agree. I don't think that I mean, I was living on tour and at that age, and even till like almost recently. Hang on one second. You got it. Even till almost recently, I feel like my life was under oath and all the things that came with that, be it songwriting for other people and
Hmm.
solo events and this, that, and the other. But like it was like I lived for those moments. So everything like the home life was just to get a bridge, right?
Yeah.
Like so like what am I going to do in between this tour and this tour, or this tour and making this record? It's just you're just filling a gap.
Yeah.
So I felt like you in that regard, like I also let me backtrack a little bit here. Like when you start off in a van, a practice space, a local band, get in a van, start touring. The reason why I feel like some of that stuntedness happens and not knowing yourself until Josh, you're 35. I was probably about the same. Um, is the herd mentality of like so when you're in a van,
Yeah. This is the
what
collective thought. Yeah.
yeah, what you're like at this point, everyone's putting a CD in or an MP3 player through the van, like being an iPod back in the day. So you're all listening to the same shit. You
Yeah.
stop on one exit, and that exit we normally would all roll into the same restaurant because you
Yep.
wanted to, and then you're out of underwear and socks. You all shop at the same places, so you kind of look the same, you eat the same, you smell the same. Like you're one. The unit is one person, and we stand for
Right.
A, B, C, and D. but what does Josh actually stand for? What does Spencer actually stand? You know, so, and I think that when I zoom out now, as I'm a little bit older, I look at that as like, that's every problem that Underoath ever had as far as the internal stuff and the breakups and the abandoning Christianity and all this and that and the other, because when we started to figure out who we were as individuals, it almost became offensive to people that were still in a small clique or a small herd or not.
Yeah,
Or
you
came
brought
out,
it came some division, right?
yeah, or it came out as they were becoming their individual and you're becoming your individual, and it's going like that. Which is
Hmm.
okay when you look at it now, but in the time, in the moment, as children, they don't like that. You know,
Yeah, it's
like,
jarring. Yeah, you're an
yeah,
outsider at that point, right? And so now, as a somewhat fully matured adult male, right, you understand that
right,
individuality is actually not like okay, it's encouraged. And so for
right,
you to be your own, but I think again that comes along with you really figuring out who you are and being comfortable in your own skin and thinking what you think, believing what you believe, and just being okay, kind of wearing that. And
yeah,
I think so many people are so afraid to be different. And that was funny because like the world we lived in, we were all also different. So to your point,
yeah,
like it was like your safe space to be different, but in our little world, we were just
the
normal.
same. Yeah, like,
Right.
because in that day, mainly in the Sons of Disaster, Under Oath, Norman Jean, you know, all those bands, um, you were the outsider in society because that music
Hmm.
wasn't mainstream yet. Even on Warped Tour, we all got picked on for being like heavy and screaming when you're playing with a bunch of pop punk bands. You know, like
Yeah.
it was definitely like we were the outsider, but as a unit. So there was still the safety there of like, we're an outsider as this unit in this group of people in here, but here is safe. You know, so you're
Yeah.
wearing it on your sleeve as a group, but not as an individual. And I look back now at a lot of artists where I'm like, man, can you believe all the things that Kurt Cobain did and how confident he was in who he was and what he was saying and the songs he was writing? It died at 27. Like when I was 27, I didn't know what political stance I had, what religious stance. I didn't know anything about myself. I was a fucking
Yeah.
boy.
Well, and I
And
also
I
think a lot of that's the world that we grew up in versus the world that he
totally,
grew up in too, right? So I mean,
totally,
I think that's got some merit to it.
I think there's some weight to that as well. But
Yeah.
I think about that stuff a lot. It's like, man, and I look at like some of the artists I adored from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, like even the early 2000s. I'm like, man, some of these dudes were so mature for such a young age. And I still look at them as like, man, I can't believe that I'm older than that person was in that picture because they seem, you know, I've always looked up to them, and
Yeah.
it's a weird feeling. But I do agree. I think a lot of it is the era we grew up in, totally different. And I'm sure for our children, it'll be even weirder. Um, if not like, or were we that weird age group that like was the early internet before social media by the time we got
But
to high
still,
school,
yeah,
but
but still
still
could
in
stay
the
out till dark and like go
in
dig a hole or something, right? So
yeah
like we kind of straddled the line.
yeah we and maybe that was the most dangerous time to grow up because our parents were still old fashioned as fuck, and you don't have a cell phone in your back pocket to read about the fact that maybe your parents are wrong and they don't
Yeah,
know what they're talking about, and you can't
right.
connect with people around the world that are like-minded with you. Like we grew up in that, right in that weird, there was like 5 years there. Like I know when I was in high school, only the rich kids had cell phones,
Yeah,
and I wasn't one. You know, I came from my parents were divorced, and I didn't get a cell phone in high school, and that was okay. It
right.
wasn't the end of the world. But I think the freshmen, when I was a senior, by the time they were seniors, it would have been the end of the world if you didn't have a cell phone.
Yeah,
You
everybody
know,
had
like
phones at that point. The
yeah.
Nokia
So
with the switch plate you could play Snake
yeah,
on that phone. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. And I know that people in my grade had them, but it was like the cell phone plans were expensive, and kids
yeah,
don't know the value of any of that. So I didn't get one, and that was fine.
yeah,
Like I used to tell my friends that let's go skateboarding after school, and they'd show up or they didn't. You know, and you're there or you're not, and like it
yeah.
wasn't
And
a
you just did what you did, and you lived your life. And you
mm-hmm,
didn't document it for the whole world to see, and which I understand the
right,
irony of that as I'm doing that right now. But point
right,
was, times change. So okay, so let's go back here. You the first record that you were on is turns 20, which is
Next year.
bizarre
Yeah.
at
Right.
best. Um, so how long, for if anybody doesn't know, if they're not aware, how long have you actually been playing music, like as a like your job, like professionally?
Well, I mean, as my job, it's like my only job. I think it started with Underoath. So
Hmm.
2003 when I joined the band. Um, but I was doing it before that. I mean, I played my first like sold out show in a venue by age 12. I was a guitar player in my older brother's band, who also went on. My older brother was also signed to Solid State Tooth and Nail and did a
Hmm.
lot of touring. But this was way before that. We were in bands in high school. I mean, I was playing like birthday parties and stuff in like middle school. I played my first like it was a small venue, it was like 200 cap, but I remember my brother was in high school and I wasn't quite in high school yet, and we sold that venue out with some friends' bands, and I was like a child. Um, so I've been playing music like it was really weird because when COVID hit, not to derail the whole question, that was the longest I had been without performing
Without
on
playing,
stage
yeah,
in front of people since I was 12 years old. Because after 12, we played a show at least once a month, all the way up until, if not more than once a month, until we
COVID.
started until we regionally started touring in high school, and then getting signed. I signed a record deal, two record deals at different times before joining Under Oath, and so I was like doing it even in high school pretty much professionally, but not
Full
making
time.
money to call it. Yeah, I think it became full time maybe the year before I joined Under Oath. I was still in an I was I'd gone through 3 to 4 bands at this point, and through high school and to right after. Me and my brother were in a band that was touring, that was signed, and that was our only. Well, that's not true. It wasn't my only job. I used to. So check this out. I used to go on tour, like 30 days straight, come home, and we lived at our guitar player's parents' house because we couldn't afford rent. And I would wake
Sure.
up the very next day at 6 in the morning and go with him and his dad to do drywall in the Florida heat, 6 a.m. Like my life just like
I would
that was
love
my.
watching you hang drywall. I would
And
love to
I
watch
did the
that.
I did
The
the
putty.
yeah, and then scraped the floor and got on those stilt things and did the ceiling. Oh, it was terrible, and it was so hot. Like it was, and we did that. I did that for like 2 years with them, like that, and then joined Under Oath, and we started touring, and we weren't making a lot of money either. I still think I was doing the drywall thing at the beginning, and then we just toured so much that it was like,
You
uh,
couldn't do anything else.
yeah, like at the beginning, back in those days, like before the streaming era, like that's how you got noticed, and that's how you got on
Mm,
a tour, and that's you went and supported, and you got in front of people, and you were hoping that you were impressionable enough that they'd stop by your. They're there to see headliner A, B, or C, whoever the headliner
right.
is, and you're opening, hoping that you can convince 1 to 100 people to stop by that merch table and grab your record. And the record
Yeah.
was always a poor representation of what you actually were live, because
Right.
before that everyone had Pro Tools and Logic and Ableton on their computers, and it was know how to use a computer. Back in those days, it was like recording was expensive, and our scene wasn't mainstream, and you had to make a record pretty fast, and they always sounded not really like you,
It's
because you
garbage. Yeah.
yeah, because you couldn't capture it, right? It was like it was either overproduced and wonky, like Chasing Safety, in my opinion, or it was like a garage band and sounded like someone just
Just
put a microphone in the room. Yeah, so it was like,
yeah. Just like go 1, 2, 3, go.
yeah,
But
so
there's something. There was something. I vividly remember the first time I was in a band and we recorded like a demo, right? And we had burned a bunch of CDs. There was something super like magical about hearing that in my car for the first time.
oh yeah.
Like it was like, man, like okay, like this is a thing. Like we can do this. So okay, so talk about what was it like touring with your brother? I mean that had to have been a good time, right? Like you and your brother.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it was a great time, and it was stressful because you were eating off of like $5 a day kind of stuff. Like,
Gas station food, man.
dude, yeah, like going into Walmart and buying like the big loaf of bread for $1 and then like one thing of meat and everyone putting out and ripping it into the 5 quarters. And what were those soda machines outside to where it had like, what was their brand? The Sam's Choice Cola stuff that was like,
Yeah, it was like Mountain Lightning was their Mountain Dew
yeah,
or
what
whatever.
was the
It was
what was
just awful.
the Dr. Pepper one?
It's like Dr. Thunder. I think it was Dr.
Yeah,
Thunder. It was Dr.
and
Thunder.
and I remember that we like it was cheaper than the water, so you would always go for the soda. It was fucking terrible, man. It was like God, and like sleeping on people's floors,
Yeah,
or
I
you
remember. I do
or
remember that begging for places to sleep, like from
like you
stage.
would say it from the state. Yeah,
Yeah,
you'd be
yeah.
like, hey, we're from Florida and it's South Carolina. And you're like, if anyone's got a place for us to stay tonight, this next call, it's called fuck you, like, whatever.
Yeah. It's like you'd be like, hey, by the way, we have nowhere to stay. We don't want to sleep in the van. Can we sleep on your floor? Yeah, we used to
Right.
have. I mean, we had so many. So Lee and I lived together before, really, right when May League was about to start, and we had so many people. I remember we between the Barry and me rolled in one night to Birmingham, and I think they had like 22 people in that van. I mean, I'm being facetious, right? Like, but I think they
Right.
legitimately had like 14 people, and we had this 2 bedroom, 2 bathroom townhouse that we were renting, and it was like, hey, can we stay with you all? Like, Lee was like, yeah, come on, and like there were dudes just there was bodies everywhere. I vividly
Yep.
remember waking up the next morning, I'm like, I don't know that dude. I'm pretty sure he wasn't here when I went to bed last night. Like, I have no idea what's happening. Like, who are these people? But I remember that the call from stage for a place to stay was always clutch. That was always a good. That
Yeah.
was always a good one.
And like sometimes you'd end up at a place that was like sketchy as hell, or like it was a kid who was like, yeah, and you come back, it's a super nice place, and then you realize it's this kid's parents' house, and then when the
Yeah,
parents get up,
it's bad
oh,
news bears.
I'll never forget, we were staying in someone's basement, and it turned into a fight upstairs with the kid and the parents, and it was so brutal. We ended up just walking out the back door of the basement, getting in the van, and just kept going. We're like,
Yeah,
we
like
can't
it's
do
just
this.
not worth it. Yeah, it's just not
Yeah,
worth it.
yeah, or
What
like some.
um
Mm,
what is what's the funniest memory you've got of a situation that y'all got in, like as a result of, like, especially when you're starting out, right? Like when you didn't know any better or you just didn't care to think about whether this was a good idea or not. What's the one thing you remember doing, or you would like look around afterwards and you're like, this is not good. We shouldn't be here. Like, this is a bad
I mean, most of it, right? I mean, staying at strangers'
idea.
houses back then, like,
Yeah, can you imagine doing that now?
I don't know how people do it now. I guess they don't, though, right? You don't tour until you've got to have your Spotify algorithm in check before they'll even give you
Yeah.
a
If you don't have
chance to.
100,000 unique listeners a year, you can't tour.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really. I mean, it's crazy. Um,
So
the
I remember once we played in El Paso, Texas, and a fight broke out. And so we were like, all right, the show got cut short, promoter. I mean, like, it was like a brutal fight. Like, cops had to come a whole bit. And I don't remember what it was about, but like the first band was playing. And so the whole show got blown up. So this kid was like, hey, I've got this farm. My parents have this farm. And so you can like come there. We have a PA. Will you guys come play? We'll all pitch in and pay you. We're like, I mean, yeah, that sounds
cool.
kind of fun. And
Yeah,
so it was like 10, it was like 9, 10 o'clock. So he was like, okay, you got to follow me because we're going to have to kind of go off road a little bit where we've got, 18-foot trailer or 12, however long the trailer was
yeah.
long, full of equipment. You got a van full of humans. And I'm like, yeah, cool. Let's go for it. And so we get to riding, right? We're going down, we get off the interstate, you get off this exit, then you turn on this dirt road and you kind of weave. And we're like, how are we going to get into this place, right? So we get in, we set up, and we roll. I remember playing, and there was like probably 50 people just kind of in a semicircle watching us play in this field. And at some point, I think we actually didn't realize this until we were leaving, but we went into Mexico. Like, we were like just across the border, and because
That's
I
a
remember seeing dudes come walking up out of the field. Yeah, and so Juarez is like right there. So I don't know that we were actually in Juarez, but like dudes kind of came up and were like, watching and like that guy was not at the show. Like, this is weird. But I mean, we left. We had a great time. We sold more merch that night. I think we did that entire tour. We like
Wow.
Robbie just like took all the shirts out of the van and just like laid them over, and they're like, yeah, I want that one, that one, that one, and that one. So I mean, it was that was
Wow.
one where I remember looking around going like, this was probably not the best idea for me to
Yeah.
do. But I
That's
mean, at that
great.
point, you're there. So all right, so
Wow.
what's the okay? Because I think growing up, or maybe okay, so people have these illusions of what it's like to be in a band, right?
Yeah.
And they have these illusions of what it's like. I mean, you guys are big, right? Like you're a very successful group. Like it's you've been 20 plus years now. Like most people don't make it two, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so I've personally watched you play in front of 40, 50,000 people. I don't know what the biggest crowd you've ever played in front of is, but people have all these illusions that it's all this like really like glitzy, glamoury, like really nice posh lifestyle. And I think maybe for some, like, if your name's like Taylor Swift, then yeah, probably so, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
But I think coming up the way that you came up brings some different perspective and some different life lessons. So like, what's some things that like the grind of building, it's a company, right? So you call it what it is, building
Yeah.
a business. What's been some things that you've learned, like some of the valuable lessons you've learned as you've kind of grown up and matured into this business?
I tell when like younger people or even people my age that like maybe they kind of like joke about like, oh, isn't it nice you got lucky and you made, and I'm like, no, there's really no luck in it. It's like you said, it's like any other business. But
Yeah,
I think you do get to do what you love. So number one, make sure you actually fucking love it.
yeah,
Don't love the idea of being in a band. Don't love the idea of being famous or money or girls or drugs or whatever it is, or touring, even the traveling.
yeah,
Like make sure you love music and you care about not only writing it and creating it, but the equal side to it's performing it, and performing it night after night after night after night after night. And like some of the best singers in the world, like they get on these shows like The Voice or whatever. It's like, but can you do that for an hour and a half every night, 6 nights in a row? And can you do it when you got the flu? Can you
yeah.
do it when you've got a chest congestion? Can you do it when your grandma died and you're in fucking Spain and they're in
There's
South
nothing. You're
Carolina?
there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So it's like make sure you love it. Number one, um, and like, are you willing to things that things that I didn't really think about, like I loved it. When I was a little kid, I said I was either going to be a professional skateboarder or a professional musician, and I wasn't going to stop until I did one or the other. And I did that. Like I wasn't dating in high school and like going out on dates with girls and doing shit. Like, if I had a girlfriend, it was like, oh, you're coming to band practice or you're going to watch me skateboard. Like, that's what like
and this is what I do.
this is what I do. Yeah. And like nothing got in my way. And also, like, a lot of people that I knew at the time that would like kind of were like, I don't know if it was like jealousy or they just kind of like, oh, like, isn't it nice to be you or whatever. I was like, yeah, bro, but you wouldn't give up your nice car
Yeah,
when it came to it. You wouldn't give up your apartment. Like when someone was like, hey, are you willing to, if you could look in the future and be like, it's going to take 5 to 10 years for you to like turn a profit here. You're going to go back to living on someone's parents' floor. You're not
yeah.
going to have money for that car. Like you can't take that girl on a date. You can't do A, B, and C. You're not going to go to the parties and party because you can't afford to. You can't even buy a beer at the bar, but you're going to get to where you go eventually. Are you willing
Right.
to do it? And most people, when you put a gun to their head, they're going to say no.
Yeah,
And I think that's the difference between a band like Underoath and a band that maybe had like a split second or a little flash in the pan, is that like, and it's also not, it doesn't have to be this and it doesn't have to be like this. Like zoom out and look. Like when you look at Deftones' career or Foo Fighters' career, you're seeing this. But
hmm
like if you zoom way in, you'll see a lot of this stuff. It goes across the line, like where those like one year they've got a record that really connects, and like maybe the third Deftones record doesn't, and they're back in big venues. but they stayed the course and they're still on an upward trajectory.
Yeah,
When
right.
you zoom out, like, and if you zoom out, if it's still growing and it's not always going to be perfect. And I think a lot of bands, including Underoath, like when things got tough, half the band quit, and then we ended up breaking
Yeah.
up for a couple of years, like because it's like you can't handle the tough times once you got the good times, and that is a character flaw, and that's a bad business. So
Well,
I
and
do.
I'll also think on that though. So like I'm in the real estate world now, right? And it's a shit market. It's terrible. And so I think a lot of people just lack perspective, and especially at the age where like actual chronological age that you were when everything kind of happened the first time. I think
Mhm.
the hard times really do test people's resolve, and you see like cracks in relationships. But most of that's not because people are bad. It's just because they've never dealt with real life shit, right? And
Right,
so they don't know how to like bounce back and handle a tough moment. And so I
right.
think,
Most of
and
us
for
don't.
me, yeah. And I mean, like I had a really easy life up until my mid 30s. Like it was pretty cool. Like I got to do a bunch of things. I got to travel, I mean, all the bands that I liked growing up ended up being like really good friends of mine. And like I got to go all over the place, like all over the country, some of them all over the world with them. And like that was like, it was awesome. Now, to your point, I didn't love the life. Like I love writing, I love performing, I love that. But it was the travel and all this stuff.
It's tough.
It killed me. And I remember there were nights I would just drink myself into oblivion just to like go to sleep because I couldn't sleep anywhere. And it got to a point where, like it wasn't worth it for me anymore. And so,
It's not for everybody. Like
now,
I'm a firm believer of it. It's not for everybody. Just like working on Wall Street and making all that money and living that fast paced lifestyle, it's not for everybody. And that's
yeah.
okay. That's totally fine.
Well, it
It's
comes with
a
its own unique set of challenges. And honestly, it's not that dissimilar. Realistically,
Mhm.
it's really not that dissimilar. It just has a different price tag attached to it. So
Yeah.
I think that's a thing. I would agree that that's a huge misconception that people have about like the lifestyle that it is, and like having like you still have like general life shit to deal with. Like that's not going to change. That
Yeah.
doesn't go away. So then okay. So what is like you've had a huge last year and a half, 2 years, right? You became a father.
Right.
So how has that changed like the way, I talked about perspective earlier, like how has that changed the way you look at everything? I mean, because it changes
Um,
like on a dime,
yeah.
right? So,
I mean, you know, so me and my ex have a child together. Um, so there's another layer that makes it more difficult is that I
right.
don't have the other half to help. I mean, I do, you know what I mean? It's not like it's a family. And
Not in the
so,
same house, right? Correct.
right, right. So, when I found out about that I was going to have a child, it put a lot of gas in my tank. So I went and I made two records. I went and made my first ever solo record. I went and wrote a new Under Oath record and wrote a solo record at the same time while also opening doors and avenues like I was writing for EDM artists, I was writing for rock, metal, pop. I was doing everything I could because I had this whole other inspiration of like, well, you could look at it two ways. I've either got to stop and get some sort of stable career and be a normal dad, which wasn't an option for me. That's just not who I am. And this is a very successful career that's still growing for me. So my other option was, we're going to put pedal to the metal and realize that this is how I provide for my child.
Yeah.
And this is how I'll always provide for my child. So it really put a lot of things in perspective as far as like, also I was, a couple years off of being off drugs, which really helped before I found out about my daughter coming along. So I was already on a good path. And then when I found out about her, it really like opened my eyes a lot about where my priorities lie. And it just made me be like, man, I need to be a better singer, a better songwriter. I need to be in better shape.
Yeah.
I need to really, it's a whole other lens to look at your career through. And like the worst part about my job now is being away from her.
Yeah.
And but I also know this is how I'm going to provide a good life for her and a cool life for her. Like she's going to get to grow up and see, like I look at the other guys in the band, their kids, like the stuff that they've already gotten to do, like stand side stage at when we sold out the Yingling Center, which is an arena in our hometown. You know, all those kids were up there, but mine wasn't born yet, but it was right before COVID, you know?
Yeah.
And they were all standing up there watching their dads do that. And that's like such a cool thing. And I keep that in my mind is like, I've got to be the best for not only for me and for my fans and for future fans, but also for definitely for her. And she's taught me a lot about love and loving myself and like what that real unconditional love is that I
Yeah.
probably wasn't aware of, or at least I didn't remember.
Yeah.
And she's just given me a whole new lease on life to where I can look at things through a different lens, and it's awesome. Like, um, I know that like on the hardest days, you can't quit, you can't give up, and there's never an option anymore of like, you know, I've had one too many drinks on tour, and I'm tired, I've been gone. I'm gonna go get high or whatever. Like I used to
Yeah.
do, even after being off drugs for a while. It's like that's not an option anymore because I've got that little girl at home,
Yeah.
and I feel like once a month for the last 3 years, one of my friends has passed away from accidental overdose or this cut with fentanyl, that cut with fentanyl, this fentanyl. You know, it's like that's not an option. You know, so
Right.
there's
Yeah.
like so many different things for me to be like, my only option is to be a better me every day I wake up. And I think that changes songwriting. I think that changes performing. I think that changes physical and mental health, you know? So
Well,
it's honestly,
you've got different weight on your decisions now, right?
yeah. And it's all positive stuff. Like even in the situation that I found myself in, which was being a single father in a touring band, like how the fuck am I going to do this? Like it's still the best thing, you know, like that, that,
It forces you to perform
yeah,
as a professional, as a father. Like it forces your hand. Like you
yeah,
don't have, to your point. I mean, well, you always have an option, but the other option's terrible,
yeah,
right, for your child. So like, I mean, and the unfortunate part is so many people will choose the other option.
yeah,
You good talking about that at all about
yeah,
about drugs? Okay, so
yeah,
I mean, it was never, mine was always booze, right? Drugs were
yeah.
never really hard for me, but what was it like for you? Because I remember when everything was kind of going down, and I remember we talked, I don't know where we were, but we were somewhere and we talked about it, and I was just like, you good? You're like, yeah. You kind of were like, I think it was maybe New Orleans for whatever reason. I kind of remember it being New Orleans.
It
But like, I
would
mean,
be fucking New Orleans.
of course, yeah, right. I mean, we were like walking around like the quarter together, and I didn't know. Like, I mean, I was with you a lot, like, and I didn't know. And so, like,
That was the scary thing is that's something I was really good at, and that's dangerous. If you're a fully functioning drug addict where you don't miss an interview, you don't miss sound check, you don't miss a show, you don't fuck up in studio, you don't fuck up on stage, but it's part of your everyday life, and so you don't see the harm in it, you know. And
yeah,
like in going back to our earlier conversation about like the herd mentality and becoming an individual, like a lot of that I think was because in the early years when Underoath was a Christian band and like starting to break that herd personally and being like, I don't think I agree with a lot of this stuff that
right,
my best friends stand for, and I'm in a situation to where if I say anything, I'll get kicked out of the band, or I'll get dropped from the record label, or I'll get this is not good scenario to be in, and you start to feel trapped,
yeah, like
and you
you're living a lie.
and then you trap a young boy in a corner, and then what happens? They go inward or they go outward, and they lash out and attack. So my thing was like, I found myself getting high to escape that, and it could be my
Hmm.
thing. It was my person. No one knew. It was something I got to do alone and just disappear from the whatever that feeling was of like, man, I can't even talk about feeling different than these guys because we can't even talk about it. And when you can't
Yeah.
talk, when you can't communicate, I mean, what ended up happening was the whole band imploded because no one could talk. Because at the same time I was doing this, I had no idea that our bass player was becoming an atheist. You know, he
Yeah.
was totally like, and he couldn't talk about it. So he became an angry asshole, and I became a closet using drug addict. And Tim
Well,
is
I always knew Grant was an asshole. He was not great at hiding that. So
no, he
just
wasn't.
for just for the record.
He was lashing. He was just mean to people, and then Aaron was going to the hospital having fake heart
Panic
attacks and
attacks. Yeah.
panic attacks, and then Tim was eating out of trash cans and holding the Bible all day and walking off in the woods barefoot, reading Bible studies by himself and dumpster diving. Like it was like everyone dealt with their pressure in a different way,
Yeah.
and I guess mine was just more normal rock and roll of what normal people in my shoes do. But um,
Well, what was it like for you when you were like, okay, like I got to get this under control? Like what was the thing? I mean, I think this is probably like super valuable for people if anybody ever sees this and is like dealing with it and trying to figure out how to navigate that situation. Like what was it for you where you were like, okay, enough's enough. Like I got to get myself right. Like this has got to stop.
I mean, it went on for way too long, and I had probably many a times where I should have done that. You know, I had a lot of close calls. I had a lot, and none of it mattered. I think I wasn't, you know, the band yelling at me, us dropping off tours, getting kicked out of the band, coming back in the band breaking up, the band getting back together. And I just think at one point I looked at myself in the mirror and I was like, I had gotten out of a toxic relationship because most people that I was around were toxic. You know, your
Yeah.
energy, you draw that kind of energy. So a lot of my friends were users. The girls that I would date would be toxic. You know, not good people. They're either seeing you as prey and taking advantage of that, or they're also
Hmm.
a user in some sort of way as sort of, you know, alcohol or drugs or just whatever. Like misery likes company. You know, like
Yeah.
you attract that. So I had just gotten out of a toxic relationship, and normally I use that as an excuse to go party harder and do A, B, C, and D, and not fucking care, and I'll have no one to answer to. And I just didn't like who I saw in the mirror. I think I was just like, I just looked at myself and I was just like, in you know, this was years ago, years and years and years ago, and that person was an alcoholic, and I was just like, I don't want to go out and drink. Like I was so grossed out by it, so I was like,
Hmm.
I told myself that I was gonna go a week, and I think that was the biggest thing for me. And I think everyone's different, and I know anyone preaching at someone trying to help them get off drugs. Like, I always felt like anyone that talked to me about it was like talking to me, not talking with me. They were like at
They were
me.
talking at you. Yeah. They're
Yeah,
telling you what to do, not
and
listening to you.
and it felt very holier than thou. And everyone that does
Hmm.
it, and I'm sure I'm guilty of it too, because I tried to share my story. But everyone tries to feel like they know how to fix you, and everyone is so different. Um, so the thing that I did was I gave myself a week, and then a week turned into two, and then two turned into a month, and then um, and then I think I had like a relapse moment, and in that moment, I hated the way I felt about the failure of what I was like. Oh man, I
Yeah.
made it so far, and then I fucked it all up.
Yeah. You gave
You
it all
know?
for that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think I was pretty much done, and I went cold. You know, I had gone like cold turkey, and I tried to do it all by myself, and I was having these like breakdowns. I was like off drugs, and I wouldn't let myself go to a bar anymore. I was like, I can't go out. Like I was like trapping myself in the bus,
Yeah.
from the bus to the venue, venue to the bus. When we were in the studio, it was like I don't go out. You know, like I don't go to the bars. I don't do anything. You know, like I was relearning how to live, but I was having these fucking insane. Like I would be completely in the best mood, and I would just start bawling, crying, or
Yeah.
like
Just snap.
laughing hysterically, or like not wanting to get out of bed for a full day. And like you have these crazy highs and lows because all the chemicals in your brain are so messed up. You know, you're talking about
Mhm.
12 years of abusing yourself. And I remember just losing it one day and like, I mean, like snot pouring out of my nose. Like I just couldn't control anything. And I told Aaron, um, who's our drummer, for anyone who doesn't know, could be listening to this, and been my best friend for most of my life. I told him, I was like, I think I need help. And I had been off drugs for a lot, like months and months and months at this point. And he was just like, I've been waiting, you know, 12 years, 13 years for you to say that.
Yeah.
And he made a phone call, and I had, I entered like a substance abuse therapy, and because he knew that I couldn't do the typical NA thing because of the religious side of it,
Yeah.
the finding the higher power thing that I probably would have run. I was pretty bitter at this point, and I was pretty mad at because a lot of like religious people and like that community of love and acceptance, and I was on the other end of it, which was the money making side of it, and seeing all the people, and no one wanted to help me, and it was almost like I remember hearing a story about myself that was like, oh, well, he's dead in the water. Then if he's a drug addict, we should just get him out of here and get someone else in here because we can't afford to deal with that.
Yeah,
Because this,
I think that's something that's not really talked about, and since I'm no longer in that industry, I'm happy to say that. But the Christian music business can be the dirtiest,
oh,
meanest place,
yeah, it's
and
all
and yeah, and you would think that it's the polar opposite, right? And I mean, if you know they're saying that they're like saying what they believe, but that world is tough. Like it's
yeah.
cutthroat, and if you get out of line, like you're gone.
It's got a cult feeling to it, doesn't it? It's like
Yeah.
if you go against their word, you're out of here.
Yeah.
And I was out of there more than once, you know. That and then we broke protocol and told the whole world we weren't a Christian band anymore and pissed off half the world that followed us or whatever. But it was the only way to save our lives. Like I think I would have probably wound up dead somewhere, or you know, like the band would have never come back or something. You know, it like we had to. We were self imploding. But back to what I was saying with the whole thing was, um, you know, Aaron helped me find the actual help that I needed. But I had to get to a point where I had to make that call myself. No one could make that for me. No one didn't matter what anybody said, and I had to get there. And, you know, and I've relapsed since then, and it was and some people looked at me like I was Satan himself and wanted to crucify me on a cross. And
Hmm.
other people in my life, like our manager, Randy, who you probably met a million times.
Oh, Randy.
Oh, Randy, he was he was someone that was like, this is good. This is part of recovery. Like you
Yeah.
do it, you fucking up like this proves to yourself that you're not, you know, you're human. And also because I told him how I felt afterwards, I said I wanted it out of me the second it entered my bloodstream. I wanted it out. Like I was so upset, and I didn't want to. I didn't go on a bender. I didn't go. Well, I've already fucked up. I might as well just get fucked up and finish
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
bag.
Just go all
And
the way.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it was like I immediately regretted it and hated it. And he was like, "That's a reminder." He's like,
Yeah.
"You needed to do that because now it's not sitting on the back of your head. Now you're gonna remember it. You know, you'll always romanticize those times, but you're gonna have these memories now of the two times, you know, that you fucked up, is that you hated it, right?
Yeah. You were
So
miserable. You hated the way
yeah,
you felt. You remembered why you quit to begin with,
yeah,
and it's just it's this it's. I mean, but I mean, I think truly most people who struggle with anything like that will always struggle with anything like that. It's just always going
yeah,
to be a thing. It's a daily choice. It's a daily like conversation you have with yourself. Like, yeah, not today, dude. Like, it's not happening
yeah.
today. I'm out.
And you find other things, right? Like, and not everyone's like, I'm not saying have a child to fix yourself. Like, that's obviously the icing on the
Yeah,
cake for
please,
me.
please don't do that.
Yeah, I found that so when I started to eat healthy and I
Hmm.
started and you know, and I do drink still. You know, I can go to bars now. It took me a long time. It took me like 5 years to be able to go to a bar and like really trust. You know, I'm a very disciplined person. But I fell in love with feeling good in a different way, which
Yeah.
was um, I joined a gym, and then I had gotten like a personal trainer at one point, on and off in my life since the post drug life of like pushing myself in ways and like being in better shape, feeling better, looking better. Like looking at a picture of myself 10 years ago, damn, I look better now. That fucking rules, you know,
I know.
and like in just really pushing myself in a completely different way, feeling good. And it's been not only physically but mentally, like going to the gym and like, you know, it's hard to replicate what it feels like to be on stage. It's the best drug in the world. There's nothing
It
that
is.
compares to
It's
it.
good.
And then you get home and it's like you jumped off a train that was moving full speed. It's like, what do you do? Like, that's what I think a
Yeah.
lot of musicians and artists deal with so much drug and alcohol abuse is because you're trying to find something. But I
Yeah,
found with,
there's something magical about being on stage. There could be 50 people in a room, there could be 50,000. There is something
it's,
unparalleled about that experience.
yeah, everyone experiencing the same thing all at once, and this. Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure football players and baseball players feel the same when they're in an arena full of people. But
I don't. I mean, yeah, maybe like
it,
NFL with like
yeah,
whatever, like 7,500,000 people there. Yeah, but I mean, like but the difference in music to me is where the magic is it's something that you created. Like
yeah,
that was in you here, and it's out there, and now you can see it moving people and it affecting them the way it affected you. And there's something about that that is
yeah.
just like it's untouchable. I've never found anything that was quite that I got the level of enjoyment out of of creating, watching
Yeah,
someone enjoy a creation, right? Like
yeah,
now as a parent, it's different because my kids are 14, 11, and 6, right? So like my 14-year-old, like watching him do something or somebody compliment on like how good of a kid he is or whatever, like it's about the same, right? So I do think it's truly something that you created that you can see other people. It moves other people, and I think that's a neat thing to that you like. You can't. There's no quantification to explain to someone who's not been in
yeah.
that world, who's not done that truly understands
But
what that means.
I found something that's not close, but I can go to a gym and turn the music up loud and sweat and like
Hmm.
throw stuff around and like
Yeah,
it's a different release, but it's something. And I
yeah.
found it to be positive, and then I kind of fell in love with it. So then that helped with, even now with like I still drink some, but like having a hangover and drinking too much means I can't go to the gym tomorrow,
Yeah, you don't feel like going to the gym. Yeah.
and that bums me out, and then I'm mad at
Yep.
myself. So it's really like put a great balance in my life as far as everything, you know, like just, you know, staying, and obviously the older we get as men, and like the more active we need to be to stay at our peak, you know, like every year from here on out could be the best version of you if you're
Yeah.
doing it right. You know, next year could be a better year for Josh if Josh does it right. You know, same with me. It's like you just you have to find that inspiration to do it. And I think getting off drugs and finding things that I love that were feeling good in a different way, even like down to sleep. Like I used to sleep always fucked up and trashed and all this stuff.
So you
And now
never
it's like,
rested, right?
yeah. And now it's like, dude, I know this sounds silly, but like I bought a really nice bed and like invested
No, it's
in good
great. That's the best thing
sheets.
about being about getting older is you can like I have my pillow. I want the temperature at a certain like I 63 every night with two fans going. Like I want it
Yeah.
cold. I've got a
Yeah.
nice bed. I want my pillow. Like it's got
Yeah.
to be right, man. It's got to be
Yeah.
right.
I've got all this stuff that like, I know it's just stuff, but I've found things that like I can enjoy about not being trashed,
Yeah.
and I lean into it, you know, like, you know, I don't know. It's worked for me. So yeah, I did get professional help, and um, but it was way after getting off drugs, and I was just I get to a point where I was desperate. I guess I'm stubborn enough to be that guy, you know, like
Yeah.
I was gonna ride it till the wheels came off. I can do it by myself. I can do it by myself until I couldn't do it by myself.
But it was the
Um,
like the PTSD of the preceding 12 years that finally like mounted up on you.
oh,
I don't think I don't
I
think
couldn't
enough people
control
get
my
help.
Yeah, I don't think they do. I couldn't control my emotions. Like I couldn't
Yeah.
control my brain. I couldn't control. It was like highest highs and low lows. Like it was dark, and I got to the point where I was scared. Like I was gonna like you know
Do something
maybe
not
not.
good.
Yeah, maybe do something
Yeah.
that would would put a pin in it. Like and it wasn't like oh I'm gonna overdose. It was like the dark lows were really really bad, dangerous, and I was thinking things that like not wanting to be here anymore and like that wasn't that's when I was like I got to get professional help because there's
Yeah.
I'm like yeah that wasn't the answer obviously so
So you went through that. The band took a hiatus, came back 2020? Was it 20?
this is during the comeback during when I got professional help was while we were right around the time we were writing Erase Me so 2017
Was it
2018
17?
16 17 18 era was some of it was a huge turning point for me. So 16, 17, 18 was the major shifts. I think 15 I started to take things on myself maybe.
Yeah.
16 no, yeah, cuz 16 I was still using drugs. So 16, 17, 18 were very big shifts for me.
So okay, so you go through that like paradigm shift as a human, right? You get a little older, you get a little wiser, you've got the perspective. You guys had been, the band had kind of been off for a while, came back on. Now we're fast forward, we're on like the third record since then, right? So what, and I want to talk about you doing your own thing, right? You just said, I know that's something you've always kind of dabbled with. You've always written stuff on the side that y'all probably never could have used. It wouldn't have made sense to use. And then, because it's funny, because if somebody who is not familiar with you or anything you've ever done hears Underoath and then they hear Slo-Tide, it's like,
Yeah, polar
what the
opposite.
hell? What the hell? What the hell? So talk, what was that like for you to venture out like on your own, do your own thing, and
Well,
kind of stand on its own?
I had done something during Underoath's hiatus, but it was a duo. So even if I was steering the ship, it was still, and I wasn't sure what I wanted, because Underoath was done. So it was like it was kind of heavy, but it kind of wasn't. It was like in
Hmm.
this weird middle ground. I wasn't willing to lean all the way into having a successful single, so I still was like, oh, I got to make it weird because Underoath was weird. Like I wasn't sure where to go with it and it was fueled by way too much drugs and alcohol, and it crashed and burned pretty hard.
It was a
But
good record, though. I will
yeah,
say that
the
was a
the
really really
record
good record.
the record I was working on when we stopped was what it was a little bit more what I wanted, which was honest, a little more grungy, a little bit more
Hmm.
live. Matt Goldman was actually doing it, which was
Yeah.
who did Define the Great Line and Lost in the Sound of Separation. So it had this cool raw element to it that I was missing from the first one because the first one got overproduced in a weird way to where it was like an
Too perfect.
80%. Well,
Yeah.
and also like, but not enough to where like the single was like, well, we should have, if we were going to go make it all super plasticky, we should have just like had a no brainer single. But I kept fighting it, and the producer was, it was just a weird like push and pull. And it wasn't to dog the producer, it was a great guy, great producer. And we didn't know what we wanted. Me and my
Right.
friend Steven, who were the duo, like we were like, do we go all the, like so. Um, and we toured around the world with it and crashed and burned because everyone we hired was worse drug addicts than we were, so that was dangerous. Um, and then and I've always worked for I've always written on other people's stuff, and I'm always writing music and write a lot with Underoath, and I'd done some songs that were solo songs that we ended up using for Underoath, and we had decided after Erase Me that we weren't going to do that. So everything Underoath was going to do was going to be written as the writers of Underoath, which were me, Tim, Chris, and Aaron. If we're going to write Underoath, we're going to do it in a room together, which makes
Hmm.
it more feel like Underoath. So then it left me with all this like, well, if I'm not going to work on Underoath outside of Underoath, so I've got all this spare time, and it was around COVID hit, and I was talking to my brother and like, what do we do? Like, do we invest in A or B or like what's the other thing? What's the side hustle? And he was like, "You're a songwriter, man. You should just lean into it."
Hmm.
And I remember, I did some work for an EDM artist. Their manager liked it. I woke up with a Dropbox full of songs to work on, And then I was working with a producer via Zoom, and we were just working. And I just started like, I'm just going to make a record. And like, I wanted the feeling of the way it felt when I made my first record of like, there's no expectation. Everyone loves your debut record. A lot of people, everyone loves the record they fell in love with you with because there was no
Right.
expectation before that. If they fell in love with you on their third record or your fifth record or your first record, doesn't matter. That's like their one because they had no previous notion of you before. So I wanted to capture that feeling again. So I sat down and I was like, I want to make a record that I want to listen to when I drive my car. That was my only goal. That's it.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't care if everyone crucifies me or no one hears it or it goes number one or it goes to the bottom of the charts. I don't care. I want to make something that I want to hear that's not heavy. And I don't listen to a lot of heavy stuff, and I do love it, and I do love playing it, and there's a few heavy bands I do love still this day, but that's like what I do with my friends, like which is the Underoath guys. Like that's
Right.
our thing. So what
Yeah.
else about me is I'm a music fan. I've been a music fan my whole life. The minute I'm not a fan anymore, I should hang it up. Like I still go
Yeah.
to shows when I'm not on tour. My friends or not, even bands I'm not friends with, I will go because I love it. I'm a
Yeah.
fucking music fan. I go when I put my daughter down, I start making myself food. I got my headphones. I'm listening to music by myself in my kitchen, dancing
Yeah.
around. Go upstairs, I play guitar for an hour, go to bed. Like I love fucking music. So I just thought about like, what do I want to hear in my car? I picture myself driving my car. It's nighttime, and I was like, this is what I want to hear. So I just made that record, and then unfortunately it was COVID when I made it, so I didn't necessarily do the right things business wise to where it's kind of made it this long, painful rollout of. But I'm getting the right team together now, and things are starting to kind of come together, and um, it's going to be something I do equally as much as I do Under Oath because with Under Oath it's like less is more now. It's like we can only tour America once, maybe twice a year.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's too much. So, and you can tour every other country maybe once every year or every other year. So
Yeah.
it leaves you with a lot of time. So I've started to write more for other artists. I've even got my first country cut. I don't even listen to country, but I went and worked with country artists and they were going to use that song. And I've worked with pop artists, metal artists. We're doing a metal song this week. Like I like to create and I like to play live. So hopefully with Slo-Tide, that we're going to start doing some live shows next year when I drop the album and give it a good push. It's hard to do anything new nowadays, but I don't really care. It's cool
I
because
think
it
as
wasn't
long
like,
as it's authentic, it real
yeah,
or new is I don't know. I mean, there's only so many chords, right? But I mean, authenticity goes a long way in music. Like,
yeah. And I was surprised. Like, so when I started dropping songs, it's like, it's not for Under Oath fans. It's not targeted for Under Oath fans, but that's my
right.
audience right now. And everyone that hears it likes it. And I think it is because it came from an honest place. It's just like something I wanted to do and something that I love. And whether it's your cup of tea or not, because you only listen to fucking Converge and whatever, like there are those people that exist, or
Yeah.
there's people that listen to a little bit of everything, and those people tend to love it, and because it came from an honest place, and I didn't need to do it. Like I've gotten a few people that are like, oh, are you trying to like make it as a big pop star or I'm like, dude, if it was a money grab, what people don't understand is I would have made a hardcore record.
Yeah. Because now
I
now that is
because
more mainstream than
well
probably some things.
well not only that, because my audience is millions of Under Oath listeners
Yeah.
are going to go hop
You could
on
just
board,
go.
and I
Yeah.
could sell out a venue tomorrow with a hardcore record,
Yeah.
and like that's a money grab, and that's not where my heart is. I don't want to make more heavy music, and I don't want to make heavy music without Aaron, Chris, and Tim.
Yeah.
Like, so what I did is I made something that I wanted to hear, and I didn't need to, it's not like, well, I was backed up against the corner and I'm out of money and I got to feed my family and like I got to get this out. It's like I made something that I wanted to make, and I
Yeah.
think
You
that's where
chose. It
the
was a. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I think that's where the honesty and the transparency comes through, and why people that have heard it tend to love it. Like the people that have already jumped on board are like, man, I fucking love this, and it's cool because it's like I'm excited to open up a new new world for myself though, as far as like live music and the kind of acts I would get to play with and the kind of shows that I would get to put on in the future. It's like, Underoath is an energy. It's like in a room, like the crowd is as important as the artist, and it's violent and it's everyone's sweating. But in a room, like for Slo-Tide, it's about like playing and like like when you see Radiohead, not to compare it to Radiohead at all, but like you're not watching a bunch of dudes jumping around. You're watching them play their instruments and you're listening, and it's like
you're taking it in.
It's a different thing, and like I'm excited to get like with some really, really tight live players and put on a cool show that's a different type of show, and be in a room with people that just want to feel good and dance, and not necessarily want to kill each other.
Well, that is a slight difference. But the one thing I would knowing you the way I do, the one thing that struck me when it all started, kind of like all the graphics, all the stuff started, like all the media release started going, is like I would watch you. There was one specific thing, I don't remember. It was the very first single that came out of it. But there's a portion of you were like dancing in it, and like knowing you the way I do, it was like I truly knew that you were like having fun.
Yeah,
you were absolutely like blissfully like
just me
having a good time. Yeah. And so it's neat for me, just as somebody who knows you, to watch you do that and to watch you truly enjoy what it is that you're doing, what you're taking on. So, all right. So I got one more question for you.
All
right. You ready?
Yeah.
Greatest memory of being of your journey through music. Like that's like whatever it is. Like what's the one thing when you sit there right now, ask that question. You sit there and you're like, okay, like I still like it almost gives me chills to still think about that moment.
Dude, and this is a small moment too. There's two. I mean, there's millions, but there's two that jump out immediately. So when I was a kid and we decided to go the underground route, which is play hardcore and, VFW halls and looking up to bands like Poison the Well and all that, Glassjaw, like do all that stuff, I remember seeing Poison the Well and hearing the crowd sing the top of their lungs in a small, North Carolina venue, because I was born in North Carolina and grew up there. I remember telling Aaron at one point, my version of success, I was like, if I ever hear anyone singing our words, man, God, wouldn't that be it? And so we were on Warped Tour in 2004. We were on a Smart Punk stage, which that year wasn't allowed to be on the Blow Up. So you were in the stage, you were inside the grounds, but you weren't allowed. Warped Tour wasn't advertising our stage, so it was like us and 18 Visions was on that stage. The Bled was on that stage. A couple other bands, maybe Silverstein, Emery. Yeah, there was a couple bands on that stage that were like doing cool stuff, but we weren't allowed to be advertised or whatever. So we had to go around and pass out flyers.
Self-promote. Yep.
Push our gear. Like our gear didn't ride with the Warped Tour stuff like everyone else's did. You had to push your own gear out of your trailer through the rocks, through the mud, through the rain. Like
the longest load-ins in the world. If you were on the 18-wheelers, it was miserable every day.
It was misery, and we were passing out flyers. Our record comes out. In this point, we couldn't afford. We only took, I think, 3 days off on the entire Warped Tour. So every off day we filled with a show, us and Silverstein. And we go a handful of weeks from Chasing Safety coming out. And we've been passing these flyers out every day. And every day on Warped Tour, the crowds are growing. Like word of mouth is getting around that we're a cool band to watch because we were different. And people, I guess the record's out now, people are liking it. We didn't know. You didn't have a smartphone in your back pocket. And you're not going to, I didn't own a laptop at the time. And I think Tim did. And we weren't going to Starbucks to log on the Wi-Fi to see what our records were doing. We were just playing shows. And we get to Baltimore, the Auto Bar, which is a 300 cap room.
Oh, God, I hate that place so much.
And the way the stage is small, but you feel like you're right on top of each other.
Yeah, you're hanging over the crowd.
And it's sold out. And it's us and Silverstein. We're like, well, I guess, Warped Tour, 2 Warped Tour bands. Maybe it makes sense. I don't know. And we're headlining. And it's the first off show. It's either the first or the second off show since the record came out. But the first one I really remember. And and I even remember the set list. The lights went out, and there's a thing called the blue note on Chasing Safety, which is like this little jazz thing, and it counts down to 1, 3, 2, 1, and then Dangerous Business starts. And the lights go out, and they start that sample, and we all come up underneath these little railings onto the stage, and the energy, I won't forget. I was like, wow, this feels crazy. And then I hear them counting. And this is before we're on in-ears, we're on floor wedges. Like we're not big at all yet. And we blast in with Dangerous Business, and the crowd is so loud, singing I couldn't hear myself at all. I couldn't hear the band. And I turned around and Aaron, I'll never forget. I turned around and Aaron, the way he looked at me and the way I looked at him, I was like,
this is a thing.
This is it.
This is the thing. Yeah.
I was like, this is the peak of the peak. I was like, 300 people in a room singing so loud that I couldn't hear. I kept telling the monitor guy, I just couldn't hear. Yeah. So I just went off the crowd, and that was my moment as a young late teenager.
How old were you? Remember how old you were? What year that was?
Maybe 20, like 20 years old.
Yeah, you definitely weren't. Yeah, it had to be like 19, 20, 21, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, and I remember just going, we did it. That was like, and that was like the biggest moment, and I just couldn't believe it. And I was just I remember in between the one and Dangerous Business starting, like someone screaming like, "Oh my God," or something. I'll never forget it. And the crowd, while I was silent, and that was just like, it was a life-changing moment. That was like, oh my God. I've been playing shows my whole life, since I was 12 years old, and I was like, finally played a show where everyone was singing, and like it was it. That was it for me,
Yeah. Well, you said you had two. What was the other one?
Oh, later we do our first headlining tours, same album cycle, and we've had way bigger memories and way more important things happen. But I think there's something about the first times, right?
Mm-hmm.
We were on tour, and we get to, were y'all on this tour? I know the Chariot was.
Maybe what year was it?
No, it was totally Batical tour.
No, we weren't on that one. No.
I think it was Hope's Fall. It was the Chariot, Hope's Fall, Underoath. We get to the door in Dallas, and the show sold out. They open up the other room to sell more tickets, and there's so many people outside that they block the street off. And then cops show up with riot gear, and a helicopter's flying over on the news channel. And there were so many people there trying to get into the show. And I remember calling my dad. That's the first time I talked to my dad about, my parents were pretty anti me doing this for a living until a little bit later in life. And I remember calling my dad, and I was like, hey, we're on the news. Like, there's so many people here that they had to get riot gear out here. Like, they shut down the streets. I was like, I think we're doing something. Like, I think this band actually might work. And that was a moment I'll never forget. I can see the bus. I can see the streets. I can see the kids. I can see it. I can rewatch that memory in my head. Yeah. Same with the auto bar. Like, those two memories for sure. I can like push replay and see it. It's a little bit darker and more clouded, but I can see it. And I remember that moment just being like, it's like, what are we going to do? Like, this is
holy shit.
Wild.
This is it. Yeah. So it's funny because I knew I was going to ask you that question. I wanted to end with that question. And I got to thinking, I'm like, what was mine? And I think it's funny because you said you always remember the first. I think mine was the last. And I think it's also because it was my last too. But that tour from 2007, and it was you guys, Every Time I Die, and Poison the Well, and Us.
Oh, yeah.
And you did that DVD, I think it was a Trocadero in Philly.
No, that was Electric Factory.
Was okay. All right. So we did that. And then I remember Ryan came on and played like a pedal steel, lap steel situation. And he was like on like a little jam part y'all had. And I remember sitting on the side of the stage and I knew that was it. I know it was my last tour. And right. So I sat on the stage every night and watched every band play every song.
That's so
cool. And it was, and I remember watching that, like, it was like the biggest thing I'd ever been a part of, watching watching that DVD we filmed, and like, they had that big boom arm. Do you remember that at all?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And I mean, like, and it was like, what is happening right now? Because I mean, just thinking about like 2000, like 1999, 2000, 2001, the first time I ever saw Underoath, right? Like when like Take Hold Fest back, I mean, like forever ago. So like 75 people who were basically burning this building down, having the time of their life. So fast forward to 2007, it's like, how is this even happening? Like, this is
Yeah.
dumb. This is dumb. And I remember it was like the three bands that I was the closest with. I was like all the dudes that I had like truly made friendships with, that I knew like I would still be, roughly 20 years later, still talking to.
Yeah.
And it was like the best way for me to ever go out. And I remember watching all that night. And I was almost like, because I just started remembering things. I remember there was like a blue light. I can see it. I remember the smoke. I remember the whole bit. You were playing a telly. They rolled in a little Fender.
Yeah.
I think one night you played a telly. I think that night you might have played a Strat. And I was just like, why is he playing a Strat? That's one thing I always remember is like, God, stop playing a Strat. And so I remember that whole moment. And that was like, for me, that's been really, that was my favorite one. So,
Yeah.
for what it's worth, there
Yeah.
you go.
That was a good time. Yeah.
That was a very fun way for me to realize that I needed to be done.
Yeah.
That my
I feel
body
like
was just shutting down.
I feel like I've gotten that like post COVID first tours back. It's like I was doing the same. I would watch every band every night. I was like, at any moment from that happening, I was like, every show can be your last.
Yeah, for sure.
If it's that easy for whatever you believe, doesn't matter. It's not about politics or whatever. But it's like there was a moment where the government said we're not allowed to do A, B, C, and D, and that meant like we can't gather in rooms and listen to music, which has been my whole life.
Yeah.
And I remember when we got back from COVID, we were touring, and I was like, I'm going to watch every ounce of music from the side of the stage before I go on, and view. And I still do today. I still view every show as this could be my last one.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what and that's not being negative. That's just like it's kind of giving me a shot in the ass of like, even if I don't feel like it tonight because I'm sick or I'm tired, it's like, but what if this is my last show? What if?
Yeah, because I'm going to find myself on the couch going like, damn it, why didn't I just go watch? Right. I mean, I think everything is so fleeting. And that was the one thing from COVID that like most people like realize is like, man, like we take everything for granted. And so like truly being able to like be in that moment is awesome. So, all right, dude, I'm going to leave you alone now. I'm done with questions. But I appreciate you're like my first episode.
Hell yeah.
That's it. So that rules. I appreciate you being on, man.
Yeah, let's share it and let me know when it's coming out, and I'll do what I can on my end, and we'll get this thing heard, man.
Yep. All right, I just stopped.